Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all here in this session at TNV Academy. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our eminent speaker, Mr. Sunil Kumar, today, who is going to talk to us about good manufacturing practices. This is a very interesting and important topic, as for every manufacturing industry, it is very essential to maintain hygiene and adopt best practices for effective and efficient manufacturing of the products. In this webinar today, Mr. Sunil will discuss this topic in detail along with some real life examples he has experienced in the industry. Our distinguished speaker, Mr. Sunil Kumar, has done his post-graduation in microbiology. He is also a lead auditor in ISO 22000 standard. He has an industrial experience of around 10 plus years in training and auditing of sectors such as manufacturing, production, food, and various others. He has been imparting training to a number of organizations, entrepreneurs, and individuals on various topics related to ISO terminologies and their certification and implementation. It was just a brief introduction of our guest speaker today. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Sunil Kumar. I may
I think
request
this
Mr. Sunil Kumar now to please start your
yes.
session on good manufacturing practices.
Okay. So here I will start with the introduction of GMP. GMP is that is stand for Good Manufacturing Practices. In hygiene, then second is the personal hygiene. So here the basic two principle of GMP that contributed a major part into the food industries and non-food industries, and also pharma industry. So the GMP that play a major role into the industries. So through the good manufacturing practices, they are only able to produce a safe food or safe non-food or any other product they are manufacturing for the consumption. So sanitization and hygiene, there is a high level of sanitization and hygiene practices that in every aspect of manufacturing, it covers the like personal premises, equipment and apparatus, production material and containers, product for cleaning and disinfection, and all potential source of cross-contamination. And sanitization and hygiene having the objective like review measure to ensure the good sanitization in premises and personnels, wind apparatus, process material and containers, to review measure to ensure good personal hygiene. So all these because the personal hygiene play sanitization and hygiene a major role into this area because in the premises and the person involved into the premises who's doing the production is into the GMP area or into non-GMP area or into the high care area. So all these factors are involved into that conducting a good personal hygiene. So here are the written procedure and instruction to wash hand before entering production area. Because when you're entering into the production area, you should wash your hands so that the source of contamination can be avoided. Some also use disinfectant as a IPA or isopropyl alcohol so that you can sanitize your hand and can prevent cross contamination chances. Other basic principle of GMP like wash hand before entering production area as we have doing the step by step on washing area like first you have to wash the hand, then you have to dry, then you have to sanitize. So this is the step by step wash hand procedure when you're entering into the production area. And second one is the personal hygiene. Personal hygiene play a major role into the food industry, whether non-food industries. So whether the personal hygiene is basis on the personal behavior and also their on the how they sanitization of their hands. So so that the food can be safe. First, the food handler is a key element in the contamination path of food because they're having a direct contact with the food, so they're having a high chances of the food contamination. Second, the behavior pattern and the facility that improve food safety. Behavior pattern is that depend upon the employee that how he behave with policies of the organization and how they wash their hand, how he make their personal hygiene, how they make the premises hygiene maintained. So it's depend upon the behavior pattern also on the employee, how he contributed to the food safety. And third one is the managing personal hygiene. So without personal hygiene, there is no food safety. Critical things in the food industry are the food handler. Because food handler can contaminate the food because they're having a direct contact with the food. They are manufacturing the food, so they're having a high chances of the cross contamination of food. The prevention must focus on personal cleanliness and illness and behavior. The personal cleanliness means that the employee who is entering into the production area, who entering into the GMP area, he should be clean. His clothes should be clean. His hands should be clean, so that the chances of cross contamination can be avoided. And second is the illness. If he having any illness or is having any type of illness he have, that he should or he or she could can contaminate the food. And third one is the behavior. As we already discussed, the behavior is the main fundamental part of the prevention of cross contamination through the food handler. Because if their behavior having the comply as per the organization requirement and the behavior is as per the protection of the food, so through that they can save the food. And there are chances number of contamination through the our body also, like excretion or was in the part of our skin, our nose, our mouth, and our under the nails, and also on the hair are some of the microorganisms present here can contaminate the food. Because through that the food can be cross contaminated. Because whenever you enter into an area that if your hair is not covered, that your hair can dip into the product. If your hand are not washed, the organism present into the hand they can contaminate the food. So there are the chances of cross contamination through the human. The human gastrointestinal tract excrete microorganism. So here is a second example of the human body excretion. There are a number of microorganisms present in the excreta that can contaminate the food. So ill people shed pathogenic organism. So whenever an employee or whenever a person is ill, he having a coating with a number of microorganism. Because any disease, any illness is caused by the microorganism. So if an ill person is entering into the process area, enter into the production area where food is manufactured, so he or she can contaminate the food because they having a number of shed pathogen in their body. Wound hand should a pathogenic mechanism. Um, there any type of injury or there a type of wound if there, so that healed wound can contaminate the food also because that wound because that wound having a type of organism present, so if their hand come into contact with the food they can contaminate the food. So infection occur easily when just one food handler does not observe hygienic rules. So as we already discussed, infection is if any type of infection, any type of illness he have, that food handler can contaminate the food. On a minute amount of a certain pathogen can concern infection in humans. So there is example of both direct and indirect route of contamination exist. Like direct, if you're having a direct contact, because if the food is when you're preparing the food, you're having a direct contact with your hand onto the food. So through the microorganism present into your hand can contaminate the food direct. And indirect, when you're using or when you're eating any non-veg food, any veg food that is not properly prepared or that having a type of organism present into that, that can also indirect impact on your. So the fecal oral route is the primary route of infection for the foodborne microorganism. Like in the mouth, if you're taking any type of food into your like example any homemade food, any outside food, any packaging food. So if there are any bypass of contamination, any type of if you're doing if you're not washing your hand, if you're not doing the policies of GMP and personal hygiene, so there will be a number of chances of contamination of. So here the example where the feces like for the feces, then you having a when you go with the fecal excretion, you don't wash your hand there when you direct contact with the food and you're eating the food without washing the hands. So that having a because that food direct come into you. So when you're taking the food into your mouth, then having a chances of number of direct contact with food. So there are chances of cross contamination are higher. A personal hygiene like presentation outline a food handler a key element as we already discussed, and second is the behavior pattern, and third is the managing their personal hygiene. So here is the complete procedure of how you do the wash. Washing hand the right way only require three elements like running water, soap, something to dry hand. Washing is the most important food hygiene prevention. When you don't wash your hands, so there are a number of microorganisms, hands that can directly impact with the food. So here's the step-by-step process of wash your hand. First of all, you have to wash the hand. Then you have to dry your hand with the soap. then you taken the soap or you can take a liquid soap into that. Then you rub the board first with the water. After you clean your hand with the running water, then you have to second one is with the use of soap. And after soap, you can dry your hand and can use the sanitizer. So when you have to dry your hand before the sanitization, you can dry with a towel, you can dry with a tissue paper, you can dry with your dryers. So here is an example of how you can wash your hand. Hand need to be washed regularly, immediately, like before working with the food, after using toilet, after handling rubbish or waste, after smoking, coughing, sneezing, like using tissue, eating, drinking, and smoking, and after touching hair or scalp or mouth. So whenever you do any of all these, you have to wash your doing the activity. So sanitation do not replace hand washing because hand washing is that you just clean your hand only. It's not like kill the microorganism. It's not clear. All kill the microorganism. Like as we use the number of the soap sanitizer also using like Lifebuoy, like Savalon. So they declare that 99% germs. So because not only the soap can reduce the microflora, that you can use the sanitizer instead of that. That kill the number of microorganisms. So changes gloves often you should wash your hand. Gloves are not clear than hand. For example, you are using or you are giving any food or you are preparing any food. They using a one time of gloves. But after 10 to 20 times, 30 times, when your gloves are also dirty, so you have to replace your gloves again. Not to use the same gloves a number of times because that can also contaminate your food. Because when there are a number of deposition on that gloves, so that gloves can contaminate the food again. So you have to change the gloves regularly. A special dress code is required for everyone who entered a food handling. So everyone like food handler or visitor or management contractor or auditor. Because when you are entering into the food production area, you should cover your hair, you should cover your beard. There should be a following of jewelry policy. No jewelry should be wear on that, and your clothes should be clean. Like clean protective clothing should be there, and there should be a clean gloves, clean shoes also. So clean shoes as like you can use the safety shoes or you can use a shoes. When you're doing entering into the production area or GMP area, that production area is called as the GMP, that is good manufacturing area. And you have to follow the GMP, that is good manufacturing practices. So here is the dress code that is required for everyone. Let's come into the GMP area. Cover the hair, cover your beard, should be following of jewelry policy, be clean protective clothing, and there should be a clean shoes. So here at a code, the visitor must be available at the entrance to production area. When any visitor or when any outsider, when any visitor come into the production area, so there should be availability of like coat, like apron, hair net, gloves for that. Because when you're entering into the high care area, if you're entering into the administration is a low care area. Or when you come into the high care area, like for the production area, there are the hygiene rules we apply. And also when you come into the medium risk area, so you should have to follow the GMP policy as you have to wear the hairnet and coats. So that there can be a less chances of cross contamination can be avoided. So forbidden behavior in a food handling environment should not be use of music, any phone, watches or any jewelry policy. So there should be not any smoking, not sneezing or not feeding. So that some of the like criticality of the area should have to be aware and you should have to follow these things while you are entering the food handling area. So personal hygiene can only be ever be a good as a provided facility. If a facility are provided with a good condition, there will be less chances of cross contamination. So if you're having dirty facility, there is a number of microorganism and the microflora should be there. Because when you're going to the facility like amenity or that toilet area, there is a chances of cross contamination because when you're going to the dirty facility, then you go to the production area, so there is the chances of cross contamination. So your facility that should be provided as a clean and clean. So changing room, toilet and hand washing facility must be provided and kept clean. So all the change room facility for the change of aprons, for the change of clothes, shoes, that should be provided. And all the toilet that are provided into the premises that are should be clean, and there should be a hand washing facility so that every employee who come into the GMP or production area can wash their hand and can enter into the process area. So management is responsible for the providing like mean of financial means like clear guidance and hygiene culture, because personal hygiene is a management responsibility. Because any installation of hand wash station, cleaning facility, toilet facility, that should hold a financials. Because that financials comes from to the management responsibility. Because management is responsible also all of that installation of their hand wash station or the cleaning facility. So and there and also the clear guidance should be there. Procedure of like how to wash their hand and what to do or not to do while you enter into the GMP area. Actually, communicate personal hygiene directive like develop document directive on personal hygiene. Communicate directive to all personal contacted and visitors. Keep directive short and concise. If necessary, read and explain directive to personal. So whenever any personal or like employee, a contractual visitor or any auditor who are come into the production area, there should be a clean development that there should be a document directive should be there that they can easily follow that policy and follow that instruction while entering into the GMP area. The control assess install visibly signals sport personal hygiene behavior. Example, no pets entry and no outsider entry. Because every entry of the premises that should be restricted, because if an pest entry into the area, he can see it and he can take any sorts of contamination there. Maintaining control over the health of food and the result of medical screening can lead to false sense of security. Being afraid of losing his job due to health status will prevent people from being honest about their health. A vigilant supervisor is probably the most effective means of keeping a worker from contact with the food. As maintaining the control over the health of food handlers as having a result of that medical screening. Because when you're doing the medical screening of any of your employee who is come into the production area, for example, any food handler who comes into the direct contact with the food or the in the GMP area, that they should be a medical screen fully on the external requirement as per the regulatory and also as per the internal requirement. Like he should be vaccinated, he should be medically fit, because if is not medically fit, he having any type of illness and he come into the process area, into the GMP area, then he can direct contaminate the food. So organization should aware of that, their medical screening. So because that if the false medical screening is there, there are high chances of contamination through that person. Being afraid of lose due to health status will prevent people from being honest about their health. So person who having any type of illness, he should tell to the HR or she should tell to the medical team of the organization that I am ill or having this time of I'm suffering from this type of illness. Because if he's not tell about their health and he's come into the production area and he coming daily into that area, so he can cause contamination to the food. So they should not be afraid of that losing a job, because he or she should be declare that I am having this type of illness or not. A vigilant supervisor is probably the most effective means of keeping ill worker in contact with the food. So regularly that vigilance through the supervisor or through present of an employee who's direct vigilant, the employee of their food handler, so that their any type of illness or any type of they having a health issue can be avoided. So hygiene management of person start from day one, like all ask about last illness with diarrhea or vomiting, like skin trouble anywhere on body. This starts from eye, ear, mouth, digestion problem, medical history like the typhoid or paratyphoid. So you have to be asked about all this illness, because when you hiring an employee, when you conducting a screening of medical screening of an employee, you should have asked all the things, because in the past he having a type of an illness or he having a skin issue or any like discharge from the eyes or ear mouth. Because that type of things, when he enter into the process of GMP area, that can contaminate your food, the product. So you should have to ask about all the things into the like new hiring employee or existing employee also. As you are frequently doing their medical screening, like by yearly or 6 monthly. So you should have to be asked all about the things. So educate behavior must be taught and controlled. Every employee, the visitor, every visitor, or that should be taught and controlled because the regular training be provided to the internal employee of the organization, so that the control of the food safety can be protected and their chances of contamination can be avoided. So training start on day one and is regular repeating. And the date of hiring is there. Frequent training will lead to high level of personal hygiene. And if you don't the infrequent like if not infrequent training, that will lead to low level of personal hygiene because that is all depend upon the personal behavior and their guidance. If you are providing a regular training to your employee about the GMP and hygiene, like on personal hygiene, so that employee can be aware of all the GMP principles and hygiene principles. If you're conducting a regular training on that, if you're doing an inadequate infrequent training, then that will lead to a bad hygiene. By the- So if you lead to the frequent training, that will help into your good hygiene practices maintained at your site level. So always personal thanks from a supervisor for a correct behavior workers money. Correct, but people also give praise. For example, if an employee is obeying the your their personal hygiene, that personal hygiene allowance, their jewelry policy, their GMP policy. So if any employee who is strictly follow that rules, you should have to be praise that employee, or you should have to praise that person also, so that if you praise that person, so because there is a high level of the correction into your behavior. So whenever supervisor is having a correct behavior, you should have to praise that person. Personal hygiene in the food production, like food handler with unhygienic behavior can contamination food through the indirect path of contamination. Washing hand is the most effective way to stop the spread of microorganisms. Ill people must be prevented from the handling food. Personal hygiene can only be as good as provided facility. Personal hygiene must be taught and controlled. As a food handler with the unhygienic behavior can contaminate the food. As we discussed previously, if any of employee, any of the worker, any of the like visitor or any of the external person contractual, so having a behavior issue, they can be a unhygienic contamination to the food. Can got that direct because they're having a direct contact with the food. Washing hand the most effective way. As you wash your hand, you avoid the cross contamination chances and kill the number of microbes. Ill people must be prevented. If there any ill person who is having any illness or a like type of any health issue, he should be avoided to go into the production area, into the GMP area. So personal hygiene can only be good as providing facility. So there is a training pattern of that. When the day of hiring of the employees, you are doing initially you give the training of on the good personal hygiene on the GMP. So when you don't do the repetitive things of that, because when once you have done the only one time training to the employee and you don't have or you don't do any repetitive training on that, that employee can avoid the that GMP practices, can avoid the hygiene practices. And if you frequent training given to that, that produces a high level of personal hygiene. Because when you increase the awareness of the personal hygiene, that employee covered that hygiene practices better than previously he was doing. Because when you frequent giving of refresher training are given to employee, they're having a high chances of their personal hygiene maintenance. So when you infrequent training are there, there are a low level of personal hygiene are there. A food handler, as we discussed, the unbehavior because unhygienic can contaminate the food, indirect paths of contamination also. when the other food handler who having that not direct contact with the food can also contaminate the food, because when the food is contact, when the packaging of the food is done, they can contact with the food, so they can also directly contaminate the food. So ill person that must be prevented from handling. If they have, if the any of the person who are working into the GMP area or into the food handling area, and they having a type of illness, they should they you have to deploy that person into the non GMP area or any other area, because there is not any direct contact with the food. Because if he having a direct contact with the food, it having an, and he having any type of illness, that he surely he can contaminate the food. So you have to be deploy the person the other area. Personal hygiene can only be as good as a providing facility. Personal hygiene, as you have to maintain, like the you have to provide it the hair net, and you provided the beard net, and you have to provide in the gloves, and you have to provide it the aprons. So proper protective clothing that should be provided, so that the food handling in the food handling area, that can be avoided from the cross contamination through the personal and individual. And the third one is also on the equipment part. If any type of equipment that use into the production area, that use for the production, and that should be clean and clear, and there should be no chances of cross contamination through the equipment also, because when you are not cleaning or when you're not doing cleaning, thanks to all of you. If you have any query, then you can free to ask. And in the last week, ask them the question. And if any passive participant who want to ask having query, he or she can ask.
Thank you, Mr. Sunil. Does any one of the participants has any questions? If they have, they can ask Mr. Sunil. Does anyone else has any questions?
No, no question, sir.
I guess there are no questions from any of the participants, so we can come to the conclusion of this session. Thank you, Mr. Sunil, for this wonderful webinar today. The way you have shared your insights and knowledge on today's topic was really interesting. I hope that all the participants today has been benefited by your expertise and wisdom on the given topic which you shared. I thank you for your giving your valuable time and effort to make this webinar a successful one. I thank all the participants as well for being an integral part of this webinar. I hope to see you all again soon. I wish you all the best of luck on behalf of TNV Academy for your future endeavors. Thank you once again. I request all the participants now, they can leave the meeting. Thank you so much.